first half and
No. So, yeah, we'll get started. So here we are back at Sid Library. We're going. We're not gonna shut down. There's not gonna be any COVID shut down. No. We're not allowing it, right? No. So we've got a great program tonight. We don't have our mass seeds to hand out yet, but they will be here next month. We meet on the 19th, which is perfect day because frost-free date, when you can actually put your seeds in the ground, is about the 15th. And last year, I think it was, we had snow on the 15th, it was freezing temperatures. So the 19th should work out perfect to plant seeds. So we have two great programmers, presenters tonight that have wonderful information for us. And Mary's going to start out, and then Leo's going to finish up, and we're just going to learn so much. It's going to be a experience.
Okay, good evening. Thank you all for coming. And today is kind of one of those teasers that makes us think we really are ready to get out into the garden. And it is great to be back in person in the seed library and all our gardening friends back together. So anyway, thanks for coming and showing up tonight. And we're going to talk tonight about getting your garden started. And so this is getting started, the beginning of gardens. And I'll begin with a wise old Benjamin Franklin who said, if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. And that's true in an awful lot of things, but I think particularly true in gardens. And I can know that because out of bad experience. So I'm a master gardener because I want to learn how to do it the right way, because I've had a lot of experience in doing it the wrong way. So, and how many of us sat all winter and the wind was howling and the temperature was cold and we had South Dakota winter dreams, and we look at seed catalogs and we think, I want to plant this, and about 5 of those, and maybe like about 20 of these, and oh my gosh, I'm going to try this new one. And we dream about this wonderful, amazing garden that we're going to have. And once in a while, what happens is our dream turns into our reality. And that has happened to me. And I think that what we need to do is sit down and kind of make some plans before we get started. And one of the key things as I went through and looked at a lot of resources and things trying to get ready for tonight, is one of the themes that kept coming out over and over was plant small to grow big. And that a lot of us, as we have these wonderful dreams, we tend to overdo what we actually reasonably can do. And then we end up kind of frustrated and we don't get the results we wish we had. And so I think one of the good things to do is to start with kind of a personal inventory before you plant. And that can include things like, how much time do you have? Are you going to be doing this by yourself, or are you going to have some helpers? What's your budget? How much gardening knowledge do you have? If you're a brand new gardener, maybe it's extra important to start small and maybe pick some hardier plants and really feel successful that first time and then start growing it bigger the next year. Also, how much space do you have? Once in a while, as we look at all these wonderful things, we end up with our space and all these wonderful things we've ordered and bought, and we're in a little bit of a problem. We are a little overcrowded. And as we look around and start to choose the best location for our garden, one of the key things is really take a good look at the sunlight, because sunlight is so important. And when you look at how much sunlight that plants and particularly vegetables require, it's often a little more than we would imagine. And so we look, and many of these that we love to grow all require at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sun. And so if you're going to plant them in an area that doesn't have that, you're kind of setting them up to fail. And then you'll be frustrated. And what kind of things might limit sunlight? You think, well, the sun comes down everywhere, right? Well, no, not exactly. There's a lot of places that have trees that throw a big shadow. There might be buildings, fences, your house, your garage, different things that'll create quite a bit of shade. And you might have hills, and if you're in a lot of locations, maybe the mountains, and other plants in your garden. So if you think that there's going to be some very, very tall plants and your sun's coming from this direction, you don't want to put them in the front row. Put them in the back, and they're going to create a tremendous amount of shade and probably shade and sun deprive the little guys right behind them that don't grow so right as tall and compete. And they're going to lose out in the height competition for the sun. And actually, you know, I think a lot of us kind of have always had this mental picture that we put the garden in the backyard. But what if you take a good look at your house and your location, and the backyard's really pretty shady? There's absolutely no law that says you got to put your garden in the back. Why not the front? So your neighbors will grow used to it and it'll be okay. Maybe they'll even move theirs. But anyway, so, you know, maybe if the front yard has a lot more sun and better location, feel very free to go ahead and plant your garden there. One of the things that's often kind of helpful is actually to sit down and make a sunlight map. And so you kind of sketch out, you know, where's the open spaces? Where are the buildings? Where are the trees? And you can actually kind of shade it in then and say, okay, I've got a real shady area here. Look at this area, that's all full sun. And so as you go ahead and you've taken a look, you say, okay, I'm going to put all my full sun, my sun lovers here, and over here where I have more shade, I'm going to go ahead and put my shade lovers over there. So you're trying to put the plants in the place that they're going to like. We want happy plants. And so if we put them in the areas that they really like, they'll be happier plants. And of course, in choosing our location, we have to look at our soil. And certainly soil is so important. And soil testing and maybe amending your soil is very important. And I think in the Master Gardener class, almost one of the first things they did was have us go out and do soil samples and do soil testing. So you know what kind of soil are you dealing with. And you can look and you'll find your pH, you can look at some of your nutrients, look at what kind of soil you have. And around this location, in way back, we were the bottom of an inland ocean. And so our soil here tends to be very clay and very alkaline. And so what that does is it determines what kind of plants are going to do well here. And when I grew up, my grandmother had the most gorgeous, huge blue hydrangeas. Well, she lived in northern Minnesota. They just grew like wild. The blueberries around there grew like weeds. They just grew. Well, when you look that up, and so I thought, wow, those would be great. Well, one of the things in our Master Gardener class, they kind of showed us the pH that those particular plants really like to live in, and it's very alkaline. And we were pretty much told, you plant those, you're planting for failure. So just don't do it. Plant strawberries, raspberries, whatever you want to do, not blueberries. So, but it's good to know what kind of soil you're dealing with. And so much of it is clay soil around here. But clay soil is a little difficult. And if you have a very, very clay soil, you probably are going to have to amend it or you're going to have trouble with your garden. And so clay soil tends to compact quite a bit. It has very poor water drainage, and it can be so compacted sometimes it can actually impede some of the root growth of your plants. And so a lot of times you need to amend that. You can add mulch, you can put in sand, organic material. There's products you can buy, compost. There's many things that you can do to enrich and hopefully make your soil so it has better drainage. And most vegetables actually grow best in soils that are with pHs between 6 and 6.8. And you really want a good, well-drained soil, but you don't want excess drainage. And the soil should still have some water holding ability. So if you water or there's a rainstorm, which hopefully we will get this year, right?
We know what it is.
What is that strange stuff coming down?
Someone had an umbrella yesterday.
He was like, what is that? And a healthy soil will actually drain at about 1 inch per hour. And one of the ways you can kind of figure out where you're at with that is you can do a perk test. And you can do pretty, careful, ones kind of by the books. Or you can probably just dig a hole and fill it with water and take a ruler and find out how fast it drains. And it should be about 1 inch an hour. And if it isn't, you're going to have to start amending more of your soil. Topography is also important. I live about 10 miles west on top of a hill, and those poor plants, I tell you, in the wind that we've been getting, in the howling wind, that will just beat them up. So, kind of keep in mind where the windy spots are, because it's going to be very hard on a lot of your plants. Avoid frost pockets. We have areas where there's kind of these dips and they end up with frost pockets. And what will happen is it's going to really shorten up your growing season. You can end up with kind of a late frost, you get a real early fall frost, and you've really closed that growth window. So kind of beware and kind of avoid, if you possibly can, frost pockets. And just kind of a word, level ground and level gardens are a whole lot easier to take care of. So if you have a flatter spot, or you can flatten the spot, it's actually really helpful. And choosing a location. Plants all need water. And so if you can choose your garden in a spot that has a convenient water source, you're going to be real happy. Because if you're hauling water all the time, you're going to be kind of unhappy and wish you hadn't done that. Because I think a lot of us are surprised at how much water plants actually need. And the thing is too, you don't want to give them just a little sprinkling. Because they get a little sprinkling, what's going to happen, they're going to get kind of shallow little roots. And so when you water, you really want to drench them. And one of the other things with watering is you don't want to drown them and then let them get super dry, just the ground's cracking. It's, oh gosh, they're all dry. I'm going to water them. Then you just drench them. So their water's going up and down and up and down. Very hard on plants, especially tomatoes. If you've done that with your tomatoes, you're going to know they definitely don't like it. And so anyway, they like fairly consistent, adequate water, and you're going to have happier plants. And when you look at it, when you look and see how often plants really should be watered, and sometimes it's hard to do it on a schedule because the temperature, the wind, humidity will all kind of affect that. So it's hard to say, okay, I'm going to always water on Mondays or something like that, because maybe some Mondays they don't need it. And yet some weeks, maybe they need it Monday and Wednesday and Friday, which happens sometimes in our super hot times that we get. So kind of let your plants tell you, because you really want to keep it as consistent and even as possible, which means putting your finger in, taking a look at them, looking at the soil. And again, hardiness zones. It's important to look, and the hardiness zone is based on the one day with the absolute coldest temperature of the whole year. And one of the things, I've heard a lot of people around me say, oh my gosh, with kind of climate change and global warming, wow, we're probably going to end up with 6 or something like that. It's going to be really warm and great. And actually, I think some of us who went to Sioux Falls to listen to the some of the talks up there by the Master Gardeners, Dr. Ball said, no. All you need is one cold day. And so even if your average goes up and you keep having one cold day, you're probably going to end up in your same zone. So, or you're going to be in trouble. You're going to plant some real nice 6s and you might get away with it for a little while. The next thing you know, you're going to get a real cold day in the winter and they're done. So anyway, so he wasn't real optimistic we'll all be sixes and sevens, like I've heard some people say. You think it's gonna happen. And when you look at South Dakota, you can see that we're down here in Yankton, and we're actually kind of, it's sort of a little banana belt there, because we're about a 5A, and so we can plant things that in other parts of the state, you really can't. You wouldn't dare plant some of these up by Aberdeen. And my husband's from Edgemont, and look at this little place over there. That's a 3. And I will say that is the coolest, some of the coolest days I've ever experienced. Very cool. And so if we tried to plant some of our 5As over there, they'd be doomed. And so, anyway, that's something to pay attention to when you're buying your plants, when you're buying your shrubs, when you're buying your roses. Pay a real close eye on what kind of a zone they're going to be happiest in. And a lot of times, if we want to be extra safe, if we are putting in roses, if we put in zone 4 roses, we're going to be real happy. In fact, we had a rosarian here this afternoon who kind of preaches that thought of buying Canadians at least zone 4s for success in this area. And another thing that's really a helpful tool is doing mapping. And what will happen is actually write out a plan. And a garden map is a great tool, so you can plan your garden and you can maximize the space and really maximize your harvest. And the map will help you decide how many seeds and plants you need, so you don't underbuy or way overbuy. So you have a pretty reasonable idea what's going to be good spacing, what's going to go where, before you go and fall in love with all these plants and come home and think, oh gosh, where am I going to put these things? And it'll also help you keep track of what you planted. And I don't know how many of you have done what my husband and I have done, is walk out there and say, did we put, the carrots were here, right? No, are you sure? Did you put the carrots over here? And then pretty soon you're like, uh-oh, we would have been a lot better with a plan and a little map, and then we would know. The other thing too is it's really helpful for garden rotation. It is not good to plant the same thing in the same spot year after year after year. So it's best to do kind of a garden rotation. And if you're like me and you say, oh gosh, what did we put over there 2 years ago? Who knows? You know, and so that's really helpful. And if you have a little notation that goes with it, a little garden journal that goes with it, what you can do is kind of as the season goes along, what plants really did well in your garden? What plants did not do well in your garden? Make little notes of that, so you say, that one does not like my garden. Maybe I won't buy that one again. And at the end of the season, sit down and really think about your garden, the garden season, and think, what did I learn? Every season, I'm sure we all learn things, and we should jot them down, because sometimes by the next spring, we kind of forget. We say, oh yeah, that's right, I was going to do this, or I was going to do that, or I'm going to change that, or I need to buy this. And so kind of just take some notes. And garden maps can be as crude and simple as a sticky note on a paper, or they can be really artistic and beautiful, like this one. That is not mine. I had to find that on the internet, and mine does not look so good, but they work. And the other thing about this too is if you know what you're planting where, there are certain plants that love to grow next to others, and that's called companion planting. And when you do that, then you can help say, I want these plant families together. And I know the print on this is real small, but it is online, and they're posting all these slides, so you can blow it up and look at them or find them online too. But sometimes the little plants, there are certain plants that just love to live together. So make them happy. Give them their buddy next door to them while they're growing. And garden rotations, there's lots of different plans that people have, but it's just important to consider crop rotations and your garden rotation as you're planning. And then kind of keep track of it, so you know, okay, I had legumes here this time, now I want them over here. And maybe even consider sometimes just taking a year off from something. And again, one of the really expert master gardeners a couple weeks ago when we were in Sioux Falls said she was just taking the year off from tomatoes. So she's just going to go to the farmer's market and buy some. And she's just giving her garden a rest from tomatoes. She was starting to get some disease and kind of figured she hadn't been maybe keeping them far enough apart. It's going to take a year or two off, and then I'll go back to planting then. And when you get ready, and it depends, you know, this could be a little bit different. It might be a garden you used last year, but what if it's a brand new spot that you've never used before? That's going to require a little different effort on your part. And you're definitely going to want to get rid of some of the weeds before you get started. One thing you can certainly do by hand, which is really labor intensive, and sometimes they win, but you can try, keeps you busy. And herbicides, and sometimes absolutely that's what you got to do. You just got to get rid of the stuff and start over. Do one that's going to be not harmful to the vegetables or things that you want to plant later. So be careful what you actually use. Smotherers, it seems like the more master gardener talks I hear, the more people really love smotherers. And we've actually tried it in our garden, and it's actually pretty amazing. And that's putting down a tarp, using cardboard, newspaper, mulch, compost, something that just smothers the weeds, but it actually can enrich and help the soil and just kill the weeds. And if you're starting from scratch and you've got to do all this, it might even take you a whole season to get that garden area ready if you're just starting from scratch in an area that's not been a garden. And so you might spend this whole season getting that area ready and then plant next year. But next year, when you've done all this work, and you've got your weeds and you've done soil tests and amended your soil, you're just going to have a great garden rather than just trying to dig it up as best you can and tossing in some seeds, which could be a problem. And again, we get to the till versus no till. And we heard a talk, we'll go back to that same session, which was really good. There was a guy named Kent Vlieger. He's the state soil health specialist with the Natural Resources Conservation Service in South Dakota. Lives in Huron in this part of the state. And he not only works with gardens, but he also works with a lot of farmers with big areas. And for everybody, from small to large. And his main theme is gardening or farming for soil health. And his big message is no till, no till. And so he really felt that you grow healthier plants and better produce, have a much healthier garden, healthier soil with no till. And so there's so many resources on how to do this. And I think an awful lot of us, I mean, it was almost synonymous with the spring, is you just got your rototiller out of the garage. But I think he had his with a ginormous red X over it, like just get rid of your rototiller. And that's him. And he did a really interesting experiment in front of us. And what he did was he had gone and just out of the fields that he didn't like cherry pick. I mean, I think he took one area that had been no-till and a block of soil out of an area that had been tilled. And then he had his volunteers pour the water in these big beakers over the top. And what happened was the soil that was in the till area, that water just zoomed right through there. You couldn't believe how fast it just whoosh right out. That soil did not retain and hold any of that moisture. And so what happens is you can even maybe get some rain, which maybe we'll get, or even go out there and do a good watering. But what happens is it just races right through. It's still not doing that soil very much good. And you're setting that soil up for erosion and all kinds of other problems. Whereas the one that had been non-tilled, that sort of soaked up so much of that water just like a sponge. And so it had the ability to drain, but it just soaked it up. And so that would be something in some of our hot, dry summers would be a huge benefit that we wouldn't have just this quick run through. And I just took my iPhone and took pictures of a couple of his slides, and so I'm kind of, these next ones are his slides, I stole them. And but his main theme was principles of soil health was protect and feed. And so his cardinal rule of healthy soil and gardening for healthy soil was to go ahead and keep the soil covered, which means cover crops. And a few days ago when the wind was just blowing like a hurricane, I did have a chance to drive, and there were some fields that had cover crops that looked just great. And then I went by a couple of fields where the dirt was just flying across the road where I could hardly see. And I said, one thing, we're real specific about soil versus dirt. And soil is what's in our garden. When it is flying across the road and in my fingernails and stuff like that, that is dirt. So, and he also said, you know, minimize soil disturbance. And that's where he said, no rototillers. And plant diversity, don't always plant the same thing, the same place year after year after year. Diversity is good. Continual live roots and plant, keep plants there. And let's say you do your soil test and your soil's a little deficient in nitrogen. Well, one way you could fix that is to go ahead and plant some nitrogen fixing plants. Let them do the work. Let them go ahead and start putting some nitrogen. Make your plants work for you. Ultimately, by doing some of that, you're going to end up with some real healthy soil. And you don't use a lot of chemicals. Let your plants do it for you. And in big areas, now this may not work in gardens in town. They may not be wild about having chickens or livestock. And maybe your neighbor's going. But if you are out in a farm, one of the things he really encourages farmers to do is to kind of have some livestock out on those areas, sort of to enrich and help the soil in that regard. And he showed us a couple pictures. This is a picture of his garden. He has a massively big garden, but he puts down kind of a garden tarp, and he uses the same tarp year from year, and it must be just massive. But there are some small holes that he has cut, and then they clamp right through those holes so that the smotherer stays there, and he has a spot for the plants to go in. And this is kind of early as they're planting. A little bit later, what it looks like, and certainly has cover crop. And then an absolutely amazing, gorgeous garden. And very productive, very healthy soil. And just some examples. And you know, one of the things too is if you have really, really difficult soil and you're just pulling your hair out, raised beds are also a wonderful option for that. They just work great. So if you have an area that just simply doesn't drain, you know, maybe you should look into trying some raised beds. And one of the things too, living soil is black gold. And I think a lot of it's just, well, sometimes before we were all informed, called it dirt, but it's not dirt. It's actually amazing. And it's the most important and probably least appreciated aspect of healthy living soil are what's in it. And there's bacteria and actinomycetes, fungi, algae, protozoans, nematodes. That soil has a structure, and it has micronutrients, nutrients, organisms in it. And so the more you can maintain that integrity, the healthier your soil will be. And of course, then as you move along, you got your soil all great, you picked your spot, you made your map. Then you kind of need to decide, are we going to do garden beds? What size? Are we going to do raised beds? Are we going to do containers? You know, what are we going to do? And then the next thing we're going to turn to is our plants. And we're going to start deciding what kind of plants, what size of plants. We're going to do seeds, seedlings, plants, shrubs. What are we going to do? And so that opens up Lael's portion, because she's going to talk to you about plants and seed starting and all kinds of cool stuff.
And I will just say thank you, and we will all take questions.
And she's got great fun. She's just an expert on these.
I'm gonna
I
share
thought that
with
too
you,
was amazing.
like Mary was saying, you know, some people have a lot of shade. And one of the things that I did last year, I have a lot of sun, so it's no problem, but I do have some shade. But last year, and if you do have a lot of shade, you want to move your garden from the backyard to the front yard, like she suggested, grow bags are a wonderful thing to do. And what I wanted to show you, I have one bag that's dirty, and the other bag, I ran it in the washing machine. That's all I do. I just threw it in the washing machine. I didn't put it in the dryer, but I just threw it in the washing machine. So you can see how easy this is to clean up at the end of the year. Okay, so I'll just pass those two around. And one of the things too that you'll notice on these bags, this one has a clear window, but some of them just have a dark window. And when you can do potatoes or tomatoes in these, and with the potatoes, you just put a little bit of soil in, throw in like 3 or 4 seed potatoes. And then as the plants start to grow up, you throw some more in until the dirt is all the way up to here. And then you just let the plant grow and keep watering it. And it's just an easy way. And then at the end of the year, it's so much fun to harvest your potatoes. You pick up the bag, you either bring your wheelbarrow over or you carry it over to your raised beds and go, boom. Theo even helped me pick out potatoes last year, so but you can pass those around. And as far as different ways to start, these are some jugs that I just did on March 22nd. It's been cold, so they haven't grown very well. And I've had between chickens and raccoons knock them over a few times. So anyway, if you want to come up afterwards and look, you can see I do have some things growing in there. I've listed some of the catalogs that I use. And if you guys have other catalog suggestions, let me know. I'll add them to my list. Okay, so if we're going to have a seed starting, we have to know what kind of supplies do we need. Well, shelving is one of the main things because you got to have a place to put your trays when you have them. And so, and as far as containers, what kind of containers? If you want to use, you know, leftovers from the nursery, you can do that. You can buy some peat pots, cottage cheese containers, whatever. Just make sure they have drainage holes. And as far as the trays go, this year I had to go out. The trays that you get usually don't have, you know, this is the dome. Well, my trays, I think I tested like 6 or 7 of them and they all leaked. And so I just put them inside my domes and that's how I've gotten by. This year I did buy some trays, though, extra. And one of my seed catalogs, I think it was Prairie Road Organics, they now have some rubber trays. So they're going to be more spendy, but I'm going to buy some of those for next year. Because these are $3 a piece right now. And I'm thinking they were $6 or $7. It's well worth it. It would be well worth it. So anyway, so we need trays. We need some soil seed starting mix, watering tools, plant tags. One of the things with plant tags, I like to keep only like a 4-inch so that the dome will fit over. And I did mess up this year, like I always do, and forgot to label some of them. But one of the things you can do to make plant tags is take your water jugs and just cut some strips and make your own plant tags if you want to. Ultraviolet resistant marking pens, and just watch when you go to buy, it will say right on there, it will say stands up against the sun and ultraviolet rays. So that's just a good idea. If you want to use wood, you can, but always use pencil when you're marking that, or, you know, and then you can cut these shorter too, but if you use a pencil, it's not going to bleed on you. As far as the humidity domes, if you don't have regular domes, spinach lids, anything that will cover or go over the top of your plant, plus your just saran wrap works. as soon as as far as planting the seeds, I'm going to pass around, and I want you to compare these 3 products, and then I want you to tell me what you found was different on those 3. The other thing in the soilless mixes and in the potting soil you buy from the store, there might be some vermiculite or some perlite. And the perlite does help with drainage. The vermiculite does help with drainage. But one of the things I prefer about the vermiculite over the perlite is that the vermiculite helps retain moisture. And so if you'll notice on the top of the little plants that I have up here, it's kind of a little gold. I just sprinkled some vermiculite on top, and I just learned that this year. So every year you learn something new. The other thing I use the little plant. These are Stagnant peat moss, and they expand. And when they expand, they get to be about that tall. And one thing I like about these, I take my little tweezers and I can put in 2 or 3 seeds exactly where I want them. And then when I come to transplant, I'll try and look for the strongest seedlings, but also this is kind of got a mesh around it. And they say you can plant in it, but you'll still find this mesh next year when you come into your garden. So I always either take a scissors and snip it, or I just pull it apart and take it off. And that's just, I don't know, it's just easier for me to do it that way. Now, I'm going to pass, just grab one of these, it doesn't matter which one. I want you to look at the seed pack, and then we're going to talk about what's on the label. The other thing I have up here is this is a seed starting mix. This has coconut coir in it, and I was surprised that it also has a little bit of nutrition in it, a little bit of fertilizer, it sounds like. This one is natural organic seed starting mix, and I pass in each of that bag so I'm sending around. This one is stagnant peat moss, at least 60 to 70% is stagnant peat moss. My preference is, of course, the peat moss. I used to get those great big blocks of the peat moss and put it in the garden, but if you don't break that up really well, you're going to end up with some dry spots, and it's no fun because you can't ever get those re-wet properly. So if you do have a feeder or container that you're going to put stuff in, make sure you mix your sphagnum in well. You can make your own seed starting mix by putting 8 parts of your sphagnum or 4 sphagnum, 4 part core, and then 1 part is a vermiculite and 1 part of the perlite. These are sterile. They're heated very high in processing. So when they're sterile like that, then you're not going to get disease in your plants. One of the things I didn't mention earlier, when you have your seedlings, there's not very much as far as diseases go, but you might get some fungus gnats. And if they're just a few, don't worry about it. If you think it's getting to be more than you're comfortable with, just take a yellow index card, smear some Vaseline on it, and then just hook it up close to wherever your plants are at. And then you'll find out if you have a lot of them or just a few of them or whatever you have. That's not going to hook right now. But that'll give you an idea whether you actually do need to do some treatment. And there are some organic ways that you can treat it. Okay, so then after I've gotten my little plants going, and a lot of times you'll have them in their little trays, and you can either do your soilless mix like you want, or if you want to use the little peat discs, you can do that. If you are going to use the peat discs, use warm water to recycle or to rehydrate them, but make sure that it's not hot because you don't want to kill your seed. Another thing that, well, I'll get on with that in just a second. Some of the things, you know, we talked about what do seeds need as far as to grow. They need moisture, they need, believe it or not, they need oxygen. And if you have too much water or your soil is too compact, you don't want to start seeds in your garden soil. Because your garden soil, if it's clay especially, it's just too compact. There's no air. Roots can't grow, they can't breathe. And so they'll suffocate. Or if you have too much water, they can't get the oxygen and they'll rot. So you've got to kind of have the happy medium. But like Mary said, observe your plants, see what they're doing. Then once you get them started, as soon as, let me see, where's my little tiny one here? As soon as they come out of the soil and you see that, get rid of your dome. Take your dome off. You don't want those domes on there because then a fungal disease might come and wipe out part of your crop. This year, I've never had it happen before, but this year, because of illness and that kind of stuff, I didn't get my lid taken off and I lost half of one of my trays because of the fungal disease came and it just, I could see it. It's like, get those off, get those fans on. So as soon as the seeds are coming up and you get those leaves on there, take them off, even if the whole tray hasn't started to grow. One of the things you want to look for now, does everybody have a seed packet? Okay, so tell me some of the things that you see on there that you want to look for when you're going to plant seeds.
Days to germinate.
Days to germination, okay?
Depth to plant.
Depth to plant. What else?
Spacing.
Spacing of the plants, okay? Anything else?
Height.
The height of the plant. Like you were saying, you don't want this big tall plant blocking the sunshine. They do sometimes help with the wind. But so we want to be aware of what is needed. So would I want to start tomato seeds at the same time, or in the same container, I should say, as a pepper? Why not?
Germination.
The germination time. So when you're looking at your seed packets, just check what are some of the germination time frames on your envelopes? 10 to 14 days.
6 to 10.
6 to 10 days.
4 to 21.
4 to 20. Oh, that's a long period, isn't it? 4 to 21 days. So I still wouldn't want to put my 4 to 21 day stuff. And that's one reason I haven't planted some of mine, because I had some of that problem where, do I do it at the 4 or do it at the 21? Which do I do? You know, and so, but the peppers are notorious for being slower. Now, I know some people said, well, do you use heat mats? Definitely. Definitely. Now, most of your cool weather things like a 70-degree max, 70-degree area, your warm plants like an 80-degree area. Now, what you do when you do a heat mat, the ambient or the room temperature is increased by 10 degrees. When you have this on a heat mat underneath your plants, that'll help 10 degrees. So if your room, if they're not germinating well enough, you might want to put, I have like a little space heater that I have in mine that's got that oil in it, that just circulates. As long as Theo doesn't come out and shut it off, I'm fine. He's only done that once because I watched after that. I'm like, oh no! But you know what? I think I'm hardly knocking my plants that way early. Anyway, this mat is for one tray, and you can get them, like this is going to fit 2 trays. But if you really want to get precise and you've got a picky germination temperature, you can get one of these mats. And I didn't use it this year, but it's a nice size mat. But what I like about it, you can actually, you plug it in and then you stick the little probe right into your plants, or into the soil, I should say, not into your plant, into your soil. And that way it tells you what the temperature is, so you know you can either warm it or cool it off, whatever's needed. And so this is kind of a neat little thing for your, one of those little toys that you really don't need, but if you have some picky things, or you're having trouble getting something germinating year after year, nice, a nice thing to have. Another thing that I got, was it this year? No, I had this last year. This is a surge protector power strip, of course, but one side you can program so that it will come on and shut off automatically. So you don't have to hurry up and get up there as soon as you get out of bed in the morning and then wait till after you're ready to go to bed at night to shut it off. This will do it automatically for you. And then you plug the heating mats into the other side because you want those to stay on all the time and you want your fans on all the time. Once you take the domes off, get a fan on it. You can see the leaves just a little bit fluttery. That's all you want. You don't want a gale. And do you know why you want to have the fan on? I used to think it was just to make the stem strong. Why do you think you need the fans on? I'm sorry?
Air circulation.
Air circulation to prevent disease. Okay, and that's why I lost half a tray this year, because I didn't get my domes off and my fans on. Now you do have to be more careful with the water situation because it will take more water when you've got this fan going. But it does make for stronger seedlings. The other thing, just an offside, last year I went to the dollar store and they had a box of marigolds. And I'm like, you know, why not try it? Well, I had a big old metal tractor tire ring and I put the Pro-Life mix in there and stuff. It was about that deep. I had so many marigolds that they were just everywhere. I mean, I transplanted them everywhere. And I thought, well, this year I'm going to try some zinnias in my other one. And, you know, what's it going to hurt? You know? And so I decided it'd be kind of fun to try something different because I'm not a big, I haven't done a lot of those this year. Okay, so what else are we on here? Watering tools. I love my little pitcher like this. If I'm going to water from the top, you can go right into it and just go down the row and get them all watered. Or if you want, Tammy got me onto this. This is the neatest little deal. It's pressurized, so you pump it up, and you can switch this in literally any direction. Just like your fan, you can put it in almost any direction. It's just wonderful. It's just a really cool.
Matt found it for me. I didn't find it myself.
Okay. Anyway, that's a really neat thing. And I'm just going to mention on the fans, you can get battery operated ones. I just use the electric one, and this is so nice. I have those big metal, like you get at Costco or Sam's, the big metal racks, and they got the round corner posts. And this is so nice because you can put this anywhere, literally anywhere. And it really works out well, you know, for wanting to position those fans. The next thing I'm going to just talk briefly about, let's see where we're at. The lighting. This year was the first year that I had trouble with one of my plants, and the leaves started to turn purple. And I'm going to pass these around. I want you to look at the bottom of these leaves. And if it was cabbage or coleus, I wouldn't worry so much. But just go ahead and look at the bottom of that leaf and tell me what color you see.
Are these both the same variety?
Those are both black crimson. And I think they have a purple a little bit, but not to the degree that this has been. And there was another one that I had up here that was purple that wasn't. Yeah, okay, this is your Martinos. And you can see on the Martinos better.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason with the black pins, the reason I was concerned, their leaves were not a pretty green on top like they normally are. And it wasn't just that purple underneath, which yes, the black print can have that hue. But if you'll look at this Martino, what happened was I had left the light on the warm, it was under the warm light longer than it should have been. Now here's a couple different kinds of lights that I have. And this one is both the red and the blue. And this one I usually don't have too much trouble with. I have two of these, but they're long and they're narrow and they're not real wide and don't cover a huge area. This one, that one thing I don't like about this one is you gotta, it doesn't have a switch.
Why did the light turn purple?
It's lack of phosphorus, but it's too much. The setting is such that the warm color comes through and the plant is saying flower, 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 and that's not what we want. At this stage, we want grow, short, stocky. We don't want leggy. And the warm, too much of the warm and the light being too close to the plants will cause that phosphorus buildup.
Thank you.
Does that sound right, scientists?
Yeah, so when you say warm, are you talking about like more red spectrum?
More red spectrum,
Okay,
yes.
so they want more blue spectrum when they're little, is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Oh, I didn't know that. That's
Yes.
interesting.
now
Makes
this,
sense, though.
this one, it's real heavy, so, but there's a vegetation or vegetable setting, and what color do you see?
Blue.
The blue. When you go to the flower setting, what do you see?
Yeah. that is
So that's why those plants were turning purple, because they were getting too much of that. So
So they're trying
finding,
to put their energy into trying to make blossoms, but they're
Correct.
not large enough to.
yes, yes. Now, what most people use and what I have used for years is just a fluorescent fixture. And I love my fluorescent fixtures. They work well. They're not as efficient for the PAR value, but they are, they're cool. They're not going to cause your flowering, that kind of thing. Now, these are 22 inches. I prefer these. A regular shop light is 4 feet. It's too big for me. One thing, I wouldn't want to have a place to store it. These I can just store in my totes. But one of the nice things with the shop lights is that you can get the LED lights, which like a T5 lamp output. This is a T5. You can get these to put in your shop lights. Now, I just had Fisher Electric out again. I had to get a new ballast in my shop light. I had bought LEDs for it, and they're more expensive, a lot more expensive. But anyway, live and learn, I guess. Okay, the other thing that you can do with these is do timers. And you can get all kinds of the digital. This is a dial one for the old-fashioned lady here. One of the things now that we're gonna talk about too quickly is on the watering. This is one of the things that I wanted to share this year. I looked $18 for this bottom watering system this year. And I'm like, oh, that's gonna be a little bit much. I can't do that. So when you go to the garden centers, a lot of times they'll send these home with you. Don't throw them away. Keep them, because what you're going to do is you're going to take and cut on each end, cut there and cut here. And this is wool. And what I did, remember I told you how my trays were leaking? I had to use my domes. Well, another example. What you can do is cut PVC pipe to fit. And then you put this on top of this, fill the bottom with your water, and then set your tray with your plants right on top. And you have a bottom watering tray. Okay? And then at this point, so they're more this size then you don't have to have the dome on, but you still could do the dome. But there are different sizes. Like this is one of my old ones. that you can do a bottom watering system, and you could put the little PVC pipe in here and do a, kind of rig something so you could still do the watering. Now, as far as the watering goes, I want to just touch on, if it's a top watering, you can get the water, like I showed you with my little thing, exactly where you want it at the top. You have less risk of overwatering if you're doing that. And the plants have a less risk of developing, the legginess. And the thing about top watering, though, you have an increase of risk of drying out because you can't see what's down underneath, but the water does gravity-wise and goes down. As far as the bottom watering one, there's less risk of the plants drying out. There's no damage to the plant. When you're watering from the top, you can get plant damage. As far as a con to the bottom watering, you can oversaturate the soil and not realize that you've done it. And it increases the risk of developing your weak plants. So you may have a lack of oxygen. And if your plants start looking pale or gray, you might be overwatering them. So you want to make sure that they have plenty of circulation in them. Okay, now one of the things between every year, we can't afford to buy stuff from every year. So when you do wash your thing, do a 3 system. The first tub, put in soapy water. The second tub, do a bleach solution. And then the third tub, rinse. And so that way, do I do it all the time? No. But doing those grow bags like that, how much easier is it? I mean, you can't get any easier than throwing it in the washing machine. So I love that. Now, we need to go over really quickly, really quickly. Why my seeds didn't germinate. First is the seed too old. Some of these up here, 2013, 2015, might be a little bit too old, right? If the seeds are planted too deep, how deep should they be? About half the width of the seed, okay? If the soil's too wet or too dry, like the sphagnum, sometimes it can get too dry in those little seed pods. I found the other day, some of my seed pods that were in the center were plenty wet, but along the outside edges were too dry. The soil might be too heavy or too compacted. The temperature of the soil was out of the preferred germination range, so we use a heat mat. Seeds might have needed special treatment or special care. A couple things as far as the seeds needing special care, things like celery and lettuce want to have some light. They need some light to germinate. The other thing is a process called stratification, and with that, with stratification, the embryo is not ready to sprout. It's just not ready to go. And so what you have to do is do a temperature thing. You can either put your seed in the refrigerator, throw it outside in some of these jugs, anything to stimulate that process so that the hormones are stimulated to say, okay, let's germinate now. And so that's the refrigeration part. And there's a lot of flowers, some edibles that need a stratification process. The other thing is the scarification or scarification. I don't know how you say it. I always say scarification.
That's right. I say that too, so it must be right.
The embryo is ready in those seeds, but just like how your birds eat some seeds and all these little cedars are growing along the trees, they have been scarified. And some of the things that are edible, like your beans, your okra, squash, and watermelon, scarification may help them. For myself, I love nasturtiums, and I have done a few of these, but what I do is I've just taken a nail file and just brushed lightly just to break that seed, and then we'll soak it. Now, if there's, read on your packages, because if you soak them, and it does say on there to soak them, don't soak them over 24 hours. Just do like overnight and do the warm water, like I said. If let's see, what else was I gonna say on that? A lot of the same things that need scarified can benefit from soaking. Now, if you're gonna do, one of the things they mentioned on here was that you could do the beans. If you do the beans, do not do where the little, you know, like your kidney-shaped bean, don't do where that light part is. Do the outside part, because if you do where the light part is, you're gonna damage your embryo, okay? And so that's just on that. Now, I want to show you, really, where am I at? Here we go. I don't know, any of you guys seen the seed tapes?
Yeah.
This is a type of carrot that I have here. And then these other ones, they're just pelletized. And just so you can see, they're a small seed and it's easier to plant them, basically. So I'll just pass those around so you can look at the difference in that.
Where did you order your carrot?
Territorial feeds.
Yeah. They're expensive, but.
Okay, let me see what else we want to touch on. So the special treatment seeds, and the seeds might have been a poor or inferior quality. If you get your seeds from the dollar store, you can't guarantee the quality.
Yeah.
But when you get them, I have very good luck from all of these seed companies. So, and I don't know, is there any other seed companies that you guys recommend? Yes.
Urban Farmer, Indiana.
Oh.
If you go Urban Farmer, you're likely gonna get a restaurant. Urban Farmer, Indiana.
Okay.
If you're looking for bulk seeds, they're very willing to sell you 5 pound, 20 pound bags of stuff.
Urban Farmer, Indiana.
Urban Farmer, Indiana, yep.
Are you out in Indianapolis or?
There's some place in Indiana,
Okay.
and they're very good on getting orders out there.
Wonderful. Well, this year, I know Baker Creek was quite a ways behind this year. They were like 3 or 4 weeks out. Territorial, I got them quite quickly from them. The other thing I want to share is if you do have trouble with your seeds, one of the things you can do is take a paper towel, count out 10 seeds. If you think some of your seeds might be old, like some of mine were, 10 seeds out on a damp paper towel, fold it up, stick it in a bag, look on the bag, look on the seed packet. How many days to germination? 6 to 10, okay, check them in 5 days. See how they're coming. And say 4 or 5 of them are done, leave it till the maximum of the days, 10 days, then check it again, and then that's how you will tell what the germination rate is. If it's 100%, like I brought some of my garlic from last year, it's 100%. that's sprouted, but I didn't try to. It's time to be. My garden's in the garden. My garden is in the garden is growing well, but I'm gonna throw these in the ground too. But anyway, if you only get a 50% germination, you don't have to throw your seed out. Just plant twice as much. Okay. What else haven't I covered that I covered earlier? Oh, fertilizer. On the fertilizer, I usually don't fertilize, but if you do want to fertilize your seedlings, just to give them a little boost, when you read on the container, you always want a soluble for one thing. You want a soluble that dissolves in water. But when you read on the container, that's for an adult plant. Do 1/4 to 1/2 of what you would give for an adult plant. Now, I don't like to see insoluble fertilizer used. When you spread that, you can't get it spread well on your little plants. You just can't. In the garden, it's different. You got a bigger area to dilute it. But, and I don't, the only time that I have to use fertilizers in my straw bales and also in my bags, in the grow bags. Watch for coloration. Sometimes the yellow can be either too much water or not enough water. So you got to kind of observe, like Mary said, watch your plants. And the other thing up here, I have some strawberries, there's some sage, there's some, what else? Not strawberries, tomatoes, peppers, sage, eggplant, And I'd like you guys to take, you know, if you want to take whatever, go ahead and take those. These I'm gonna take down because some of these are diseased and they don't, not diseased, but they just don't look good. But other than that, these little greenhouse things, they come in the 36 or the 72 for starting seeds. And what else? I think that's about all. Oh, for when you're gonna save your seeds, not all the time, but I try to get, you know, those things that come with shoes or with whatever, save those dry out things and then put your seeds, you know, in a bag. And this is from butternut squash from North Dakota. I don't have the date on there, but I'll just, if I want to, I can do a quick germination test. Stick it in there with a little one of those, and then it's a dark spot with the lid on, it's dry. So, you know, it works well. Anybody have questions about anything? Oh, I've got to show you this. You know, years ago, when I was doing my plants, hanging on those racks, the little S hooks, and then, oh, you get this one drops off. And you say, that wasn't very nice. But anyway, so what I have found, did I show you or did you show me these? I think I showed them to you.
I don't remember, but I know that we both
Love them.
probably found out about it from Joe Gardner.
Yeah, I love these things. Like if you're using fluorescent lights, you just set your light on this and they're cool, so it doesn't, you know, temperature wise, it doesn't hurt where they're at. But what they're so cool about, like if you're going to use one of these heavier ones, you just hook the hook on and then, oh, I got to raise the lights.
Yeah.
Oh, that was hard.
Where'd you get those?
Online. From China.
What are they called?
Ratchet hooks or ratchet.
I don't remember, but I have a bunch too.
But I just love them. And they, when I did my baby chickens, this is perfect because, oh, they're too hot today, raise the lights. Oh, they're cold, drop it. I mean, they're just, this is worth an investment and they're not very expensive. So anyway, this is one of my best things. Okay, I think I better quit.
Super cool.
I love them, I just love them. No, are there any other questions about anything?
Where did you get your grow bags?
My grow bags online,
Online.
and they're made in China. Now, for
What's
tomatoes,
the brand on those ones? Can you read it?
okay, this one does not have a brand name on it, but
Yeah.
those, the green ones are probably one of the best.
Last a couple years, yeah.
For color wise, Marlis was saying these black ones are pretty warm. They can get too hot.
Oh.
But if you're doing something, you know, and you want to kind of keep it out of the shade part of the day anyway, you know, I have some black and I have some, the green, and then I have some tan ones. But for tomatoes, I wouldn't do anything smaller than a 15 to 20 gallon. Potatoes, you might be able to get by with a little smaller. Just think about how big your root is. How big is the root on the plants? You know, if the tomato plant's like that, the root's going to be like that if it's going to be healthy. So anyway, all right, well, come choose some plants.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I know. Oh, yeah.